Hi, Serena here, aka Woolly Nomad, and today we are knitting a baby cardigan. I have been on a bit of a baby cardigan design kick, so I've got a few cardigans in the pipeline, but I thought I'd start with a simple design. So we've got some garter stitch, we've got some stockinette, we've got ribs, a very easy design that any beginner can knit. For a baby, you need some lovely soft yarn, and I'm using this Cotton Soft DK yarn by King Cole. There are other yarns you can use, but I recommend a cotton or a cotton and silk or a baby merino superwash yarn. Apart from being nice and snuggly for the baby, they're nice to knit as well. So I'm knitting with a 4mm needle for this knit along. But you can also use a 3.5mm needle to begin so that the neck pulls in a little bit. I thought it didn't matter, but it's totally up to you. The pattern will give you that option. You also need a darning needle or a tapestry needle, and you will need 4 stitch markers, and these are to denote where the increases are going to be made. Bear in mind that cotton can shrink and a tension swatch is probably a good idea. I'm using a slip knot to cast on and begin the knit, and I'm going to cast on 56 stitches. In this episode I'm not going to be knitting a tension swatch, but you can go ahead and check the pattern out, which is linked down below, the Simple Baby Cardi it's called. And there's more details in there about tension swatch, etc, etc. I'm just going to go ahead and just knit, and you can just follow along here. You don't really need the pattern because I do give you all the information in this video, but if you want further guidance and specific guidance, then you can go ahead and download the pattern, like I said, linked below. So I'm just going to go ahead and cast on the 56 stitches, and I'm doing a basic cast on, nothing fancy at all, and then I'll meet you back here when I get to the end. Oh, by the way, I'm knitting with circular needles, but I will be knitting flat, so it's not going to be in the round until we get to the sleeves, which I'll be knitting in the round, but the rest of the cardi is going to be knit in the flat, but all in one. So I'll see you back when I've cast on those 56 stitches. The cast on is done, and I'm ready to knit the roll neck. The roll neck is basically stockinette over a few rows. One side is a knit side, and then the other side is a purl. So that's what stockinette is. And if you don't know, I've got some actual tutorial videos on how to knit the basics, so do head over there if you need to look up how to make any particular stitches. So this first row is a knit row, and then the next is going to be a purl, and I'm going to be carrying on doing that for like 4 rows. So this first row will be a knit row, and then the second a purl, and I'm on the purl row now, and this is the second row. Then the third row is going to be a knit row again, and the fourth row will be a purl row. So that'll be the roll neck altogether, and I'll meet you back here when I have finished those rows. Like I just said previously, if you are struggling with any of the stitches, I'm not really going through, you know, in a slow manner how to make any of the stitches here. Obviously you can slow the video down. It is kind of clear, but if you're still unclear, I do have some tutorial videos which you can have a look at to see any particular stitches. So I've added in short row shaping. It is optional because you don't really need it for a baby garment, but I thought it makes the garment sit better, and you have the back is a bit higher, the front is lower, which is what you kind of want for a cardigan. So if you want to do some short row shaping, you can, but otherwise you can skip this part. So for the first row, you're going to knit until the last 10 stitches. And when you get to the last 10 stitches, you're going to do what's called a wrap and turn. Now I have tried to do this slowly in case you're a beginner, so that you can get your head around how to do the wrap and turn. So you bring your yarn forward, you slip your stitch, then you take your yarn back, put the stitch back on that needle, and then you turn the work. So this was the knit side, and you're going to turn it to the purl side. And then you're going to purl until you get to the last 10 stitches on the purl side, and you're going to do the wrap and turn once again, but then you're going to be wrapping and turning from purl to knit. So it's kind of an easy way of doing a short row. There probably are other ways as well. And it looks like there's a hole there, but there's not going to be a hole there. That will close up quite nicely actually. So I'm at the end of the purl row, the last 10 stitches that is, and I'm now going to do a purl wrap and turn. So I'm going to take the yarn back, move that stitch onto the other needle, bring the yarn forward and move the stitch back again, and then I'm going to turn the work. And then this next row is going to be a knit row, and I'm going to knit this row until I get to the last 8 stitches. And when I get to the last 8 stitches, I'm going to do the wrap and turn again. I hope you actually are able to follow along. I've kind of gone kind of slow. I'm not doing this too fast so that you can get your head around it, but you can also pause the video if you need to see how to do the wrap and turn if you're not familiar with wraps and turns. Like I said, I do have some other videos in a playlist somewhere which you can check out. So I'm at the last 8 stitches. It's a good idea to count your stitches to make sure that you are on track, because otherwise the neck can be wonky if you don't use the right amount of stitches. So I'm doing a wrap and turn here for the knit, and then I'm going to turn it, and then I'm going to be purling until I get to the last 8 stitches of this purl row. So the first 2 rows were 10 stitches either side, the second 2 rows are 8, and then the third 2 rows are going to be 6. So we've not quite got there yet, but when I get to the end of this row, I will talk more about what we're doing. So I'm at the end of the purl row with the 8 stitches left, and I'm going to do a wrap and turn. So you have your yarn to the back, pick up that stitch, yarn forward, and then you pop that stitch back on the previous needle like so, and then you just turn the work, bearing in mind that the yarn actually stays on the side it is, so you're not going to like bring it forward or anything when you turn the work. It's going to stay where it is. So if you're doing a knit row, it should be in the back, and if you're going to do a purl row, it should be in the front. So now with this knit row, you're going to knit until you get to the last 6 stitches, and then you're going to do another wrap and turn. Altogether there's going to be 6 wrap and turns, and that's because it's a small garment. It's not very big, and as you can see, it's quite invisible really. There is some shaping there, but it's not ugly shaping. I feel it sort of goes with everything that's happening with the knitting. So I'm at the end of that knit row with the 6 stitches at the end, and I'm going to do another wrap and turn. And then once I've turned, this is the last row where I'm going to be doing wraps and turns, and it's row 6 and it's a purl row. So when I get to the last 6 stitches of this purl row, I'm going to do another wrap and turn, and then that will be the last of them. So there were 6 wraps and turns in total. I'm at the last 6 stitches of this row, and this is the last wrap and turn. So I do count my stitches. So you take your yarn back, you slip your stitch, you bring your yarn forward, and you put that stitch back on the needle, and then you turn the work. I think this is good exercise if you are a newbie knitter and you haven't tackled wraps and turns before, for you to, you know, it's a bit of a challenge, but I think it's quite an easy challenge. It's not too difficult. So this row you're going to knit until the end of the row, because our wraps and turns are all done. So you can see them there, but like I said, I don't think they're ugly. And so we're going to be knitting right to the end of the row, and here we are with all the wraps and turns complete. As you can see, the back is higher than the front, so you've got some nice short row shaping going on there. And now it's time to think about adding in the markers. If you opted for no wraps and turns and you wanted to make it really simply with just the roll neck, you would start adding in your markers now. So whether or not you did the roll neck or not, this is the time to add in the markers. So we're going to, and it's a purl row, so we're going to purl 12 stitches, and then we're going to place a marker. Now we're going to purl another 7 stitches, and then we're going to place a marker. And this area between that first marker we placed and the second marker denotes the sleeve head, or the sleeve top, whatever it's called. So 7 stitches, and then we place the second marker. And then after the second marker, this is now the back area, so we're going to purl that, and that's 18 stitches. And then once we've purled 18 stitches, we're going to place another marker. And like I said, that denotes the back area of the garment. We are purling another 7 stitches, and those 7 stitches make up the top of the second sleeve. So between the third marker and the fourth marker, it's the second sleeve, and it's 7 stitches. And then last but not least, we're going to knit those 12 front stitches, And I always like to count my stitches, because if I'm off, if I've not knit enough, or I've knit too many, I can always either make a stitch or take one away. What you don't want to do is continue with the wrong amount of stitches, because your garment can turn out wonky, and it has happened to me in the past. Yes, indeed. So this is like one of the milestones of the knit, I would say, and it's a good place to make sure that you haven't made any mistakes, you haven't got any holes, and your stitches are the correct amount, etc. Increases happen on either side of the marker. So we knit up to the marker, well, actually one stitch before the marker, and then we increase. It's a good idea to reset your row counter if you want to, but really with the first 2 rows we're going to knit are going to be the setup rows, and then those are the rows you're just going to be repeating up to a certain point. Also, while we're increasing, we're going to be making the button bands, and that's going to be 4 stitches at the beginning and end of the row, which will always be a knit stitch. So on the knit side they are knit stitches, and that's fine, but there'll also be knit stitches on the purl side, and this is going to create the garter stitch button band. Now if you don't want buttons, then you can just knit those 4 stitches on every row, and that will be fine. But buttonholes are every 12th row, and I'll be going over how to do that. So with this first row, you're going to knit until you get to the stitch marker, actually 1 stitch before the stitch marker, and you're going to do a make one right. So you pick up the bar between the 2 stitches and pop it on the needle, and the make one right depends on how you pop the stitch on the needle and which side of the stitch you're picking up. Then you knit 1 stitch, and then you slip your marker, and now you're going to make a make one left, and you pop it on the needle the other way round, and you make that stitch through the back loop. So the make one right is through the front loop, and the make one left is through the back loop, and it can be tricky, so take your time, make sure that the stitch marker stays in the right place, otherwise the make one can be wonky. Yeah. And so that's pretty much it. That's what you're going to do for each of the stitch markers. So you knit until you get to the next stitch marker, and you will do the same thing. So you knit until 1 stitch before the marker, you pick up that bar between the stitches, you pop it on the needle, and you make 1 through the front loop, and this is a knit stitch by the way, and then you knit 1, and then you slip your marker, then you pick up the bar between the 2 stitches, and this time you make 1 through the back loop. And it is tricky, but it's more tricky when you're looking through the camera while you're doing it. So if I look like I can't see what I'm doing, that's literally because I can't see what I'm doing. Yeah. But going forward, you're going to be doing exactly the same thing. You're going to knit until once you've done your make ones, that is, you're going to knit until the marker, and then you're going to increase. So at each marker you're increasing by 2. I'll chat some more when we finish this row. After the last marker, you're going to just knit to the end of the row, and that's your first set of increases done. Like I said before, you should have done 8 increases, so your stitch count should have increased by 8. In the pattern you have an option for buttonholes or no buttonholes. If you don't want buttonholes and you just maybe want to put poppers on, then you knit the 4 stitches at the beginning of the row and at the end of the row. So every row you will knit 4 stitches at the beginning and end for the button band to make a garter stitch button band. Now if you do want a buttonhole, then you knit the first 2 stitches, yarn forward, and then you knit 2 stitches together. This creates a left hand buttonhole. So if you want a buttonhole on the left hand side of the garment, you would pop your buttonhole in now. I wanted a right hand side buttonhole, so I'm just going to knit these 4 stitches, and then I'm going to make the buttonhole at the end of the row. And it's a purl row, so I'm going to purl and slip my markers as I go along. Now at the end of the row, if you don't want buttonholes, you would again just knit those last 4 stitches, and that's for someone who wants poppers, etc. on the garment instead of buttons. Now if you want a right hand buttonhole, and I'm going to take this apart again just to show you how to add in a right hand buttonhole. You would, yeah, let's just pop the stitches back on that needle. Right, okay, so you're going to knit the first stitch, and then you're going to bring the yarn forward and knit 2 stitches together, and then knit the last stitch, and that's going to create a buttonhole on the right hand side. In this pattern, buttonholes are every 12th row. So I'm going to repeat those 2 rows I've just done, the knit row and the purl row, because those 2 rows are the increase rows. The only difference that you will make is you won't make a buttonhole every single time. You will make the buttonholes every 12th row, and you don't have to worry about it if you're not making buttonholes. Yeah, so I'm going to knit those 2 rows another 13 times, or until the work measures about 10 centimeters from the beginning of the increases. I'm halfway through the increases, and I just thought I'd share the progress here. So you should have a nice neat looking piece of knitting so far with the increases in the correct lines. You might sometimes find you go out of the lines, and that's because you've popped your stitch marker in the wrong place as you've been knitting. The short row shaping makes it, you can start really seeing how the garment's going to develop at this point actually, which is quite nice. So it's one of those milestones. So we've still got a little way to go, but we can already see how the buttonhole is going to marry up, and the button band, and how things are going to sit. So that's the progress so far. I've finished the increases, and I've got quite a few stitches on my needles now, so I can't show you properly, but everything's looking nice and neat. I've got the buttonholes there, the increases are looking quite neat and even. And it's a good chance to now look at my stitch count, make sure I've got the right amount of stitches on the needles, and if I've made any mistakes, perhaps I can, you know, repair them at this point. But I wouldn't worry too much if this is your first garment. The best thing to do is to just knit through it as best you can, and you will learn to make the next garment better. I mean, that's what I do. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to separate the sleeves off, and we're going to put the stitches on some waste yarn or temporary yarn so that we can knit the body. And we're going to continue to knit in the flat for the body, and then we'll knit the sleeves in the round. So first of all though, let's separate for the sleeves. So we're on a purl row, and we're going to purl, well, the first 4 stitches we're going to knit because we want to make sure we keep the front button bands correct. So we're going to knit the first 4 stitches, and then we're going to purl until we get to the first stitch marker. We don't need the stitch marker anymore, so we're going to take that away, and then we're going to pop these stitches from this stitch marker that we just took away to the next stitch marker onto waste yarn or temporary yarn, and I've threaded up a darning needle to do so, and I just literally just sew the stitches onto the needle, which will then pop them onto the yarn, and it just holds it there. And we'll retrieve those stitches later. So we are taking all those stitches off right up until the next stitch marker. We don't need the stitch marker anymore, so we take that off, and then it's a case of securing those threads so that those stitches don't come out. So you can just tie a knot in the yarn, and this is a good way to use up odd bits of yarn that you've got lying around. A contrasting colour is handy, and that is going to be the sleeve. So you can see it a lot better now that we've taken it off the needles. And yeah, quite a milestone, I would say. Now we're going to make 1 stitch, and the way we do it, it's a purl row, so we make it in this fashion. I don't know what it's called, but visually, as you can see, that is now a purl stitch. So I'll just make it again just to show you again, and you twist it on your finger, pop it on, and there you go. So that stitch is made. So we're going to purl until we get to the next stitch marker, and these are the back stitches, and there's the stitch marker. So we're going to pull that first stitch a little bit tight because it tends to get a little bit loosey-goosey under the arm, and we don't want to give it any excuses. So we don't need that marker anymore, and we can take it off. And this is the second bunch of stitches for the sleeves. So we're going to pop those onto a holding needle. And let's see if I can thread it through the camera. Right, yeah. So literally you're going to do the same thing that you did before. You're just popping those stitches onto the needle and tying them off. So this is the last stitch marker, and we don't need that anymore, so we take that off, and we can take the needle out now, and we can tie off the yarn so the stitches don't escape anywhere. And voila, we have the second sleeve sorted. Now we're going to make another stitch like we did before, in the same way, and we're going to continue to purl until we get to the last 4 stitches, which are the knit stitches for the button band. At this point, I think we can congratulate ourselves on how far we've come. The button band is looking quite neat. You've got to remember as you go along to put the buttonholes in if you're doing buttonholes. The increases are done. The roll neck is looking okay. It's nice and loose, so it'll be nice on the baby. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make the body of the garment, and we're going to knit 23 rows approximately, or we're going to knit until it's 10 centimeters long from under the armpit. So you don't measure from the top or anything, so it's from under the armpit, 10 centimeters. So it's up to you if you want to do the measurements in centimeters, or if you just want to go by approximately 23 to 25, I'd say, rows. I think in the pattern I've said 23, or maybe I haven't even said 23 in the pattern. I can't remember now. Not looking at the pattern. Yeah, so I'm going to go away now and do some knitting. So progress has been made, and I'm at the point now where I can add the hem. So I didn't really measure, I did like 23 rows, and that's about 4 inches or 10 centimeters. So when you're measuring, you can keep that in mind. 4 inches or 10 centimeters, or 23 to 25 rows, I think is a good approximation. I've got 5 buttons on here, so 5 buttonholes for 5 buttons, and I'm going to do a hem. There are options. I can do a rib hem or I can do a garter stitch hem, but I have opted for a rib hem. But I'm going to keep the button band stitches correct, so I will be still knitting the first 4 and the last 4 stitches of the hem rows. And if I need to add in a buttonhole, I'll be adding in buttonholes as well. So the first 2 stitches, I'm doing a 2x2 rib, so the first 2 stitches are knit and then the second are purl, and I'm literally going to repeat those 4 stitches all the way across. So 2 knit and 2 purl all the way across the row until I get to those last 4 stitches, and I'm going to knit those last 4 stitches. For the bind off, I'm going to do a very simple and easy beginner friendly bind off, and it's one I don't usually do because I usually like the bind off to be loose, but in this case I think I don't want it too loose. I just want it to bind off nicely and easily. So I'm just going to knit 2 stitches together. You pop that made stitch back on the needle and then you knit the 2 stitches you've got on the needle. So you're always knitting the stitch you've already knit plus another stitch. And if you think it's going to be too tight, you can use a bigger needle here. So I'm using a 4mm needle, and actually it is coming out quite nice. I don't think it's tight and I don't think it's too loose, it's just right. But if you find your tensions a little bit tight, perhaps go up a needle size, maybe a 4.5mm or a 5mm needle. And that's what you want. You want just a nice neat edge, not tight and not loose. Time to review progress, and I'm quite pleased with how it's gone. And you can go, at this point you can go and find some buttons that go with it. If you haven't already got some buttons, you can start thinking about buttons. But first of all, before we do that, we're going to have to do the sleeves, and not a lot of people like the sleeves because it's a round and round sleeve, endless heaven thingy, but actually it's not too bad for a baby garment, especially in DK8 yarn. So first of all, we've got a made stitch that we made. So there's one stitch in the middle that we made, and we're going to pick up that stitch, and then on the side there's a knitted stitch that we need to pick up. So it's not one of the stitches on the yarn, the holding yarn, and it's not an overt stitch, but we need to pick it up because if we don't, there's going to be a hole here. So it's kind of tricky to see, but it actually has two parts to it. So for instance, the stitch we've just picked up has got two parts to it, and this stitch also has two parts to it, so two strands rather. So when you're knitting these stitches, these weird stitches, you have to knit the two parts, not just the one part. And the transfer stitches, I usually like to pick them up with a smaller needle because you can get your needle in there quite easily. So I'm going to pick all those up with my 2.25 sock needle, and then I will transfer those onto the larger needle before I start knitting. As well as these transfer stitches, I'm also going to pick up another stitch at the armpit area that's a made stitch that was there beforehand, and that's so that we don't have a hole. So in that armpit area we're picking up 3 stitches. The one stitch we made, one stitch on the right hand side that we've already picked up, and then one more stitch on the left hand side. So when we get to it, which we will in 1 second, I think. And again, I'm looking through the camera, so right, so that's all the transfer stitches, and now we're going to pick up another stitch, and there it is. We have to go into the stitch, and we're going to pick up 2 legs. So when we knit that stitch, we need to knit those 2 legs as well. I'm transferring my stitches from that small needle onto my working needle, which is the 4mm needle now, and I'm going to get rid of that transfer yarn, the blue yarn, once I've got all the stitches on the needle, just so that I don't lose any stitches along the way. So first you're going to knit those 2 extra stitches, one that we made and the other that we picked up from the edge of the knitting, and then we're just going to knit normally the rest of the stitches, and then at the end there'll be another stitch that we picked up which we will then knit as normal. Those stitches that we picked up and the stitch we made have 2 strands to them, so be aware when you're knitting them to knit both of the strands that you've picked up. So we're at the point of the stitch with 2 strands, and we just need to knit that as 1 stitch, and voila, we have done the first row. So that first stitch that we knit is going to be a bit loose, so you just need to pull it in when you knit. Mine came out, so I had to sort that out. Now you're going to knit in the round for another 23, 22, 23 rows, or until the work measures about 10 centimeters from under the armpit. 10 centimeters or 4 inches from under the armpit, or around 23 to 25 rows. Yeah, and I will meet you back here. My voice will meet you back here, that is, when we get to that point. We've knit the required amount of rows, and now we're going to decrease, and we're going to decrease over 1 row. So we didn't decrease as we were knitting the arm, and it's going to be one of those over 1 row decreases, or rapid decreases I think they're called. But your knitting should measure around 4 inches or 10 centimeters from under the armpit. And what we're going to do now is we're going to decrease, and then we're going to add a ribbon, just as we did for the hem of the garment. And rapid decreases, you can decrease in a number of ways, but we're going to knit 3 and then knit 2 together. And that will decrease, I think it's about 8 stitches, around about that. And that's enough, because we don't want the cuff to be tight. And we didn't want the sleeve to be tight either, because babies tend to be quite delicate and fragile, and you can't pull them around too much. So anything that makes it easier to get the garment on the baby is always a plus. So we're going to do the decreases till we get to the end of the row. So that's knitting 3 and then knitting 2 together. At the end of that row, that decreasing row, knit 2 stitches together, because you will have or should have uneven stitches. If you've got even stitches, you're okay. So check your stitches. So we're doing a 2 by 2 rib, and that's why we needed an even amount of stitches. So it's 2 knit, 2 purl. So you're knitting 2, then purling 2 until the end. It's pretty much the same as the hem that we just did. And you're going to do that over 4 rows. And once your 4 rows are done of the hem, then you're going to bind off. And it's the same bind off where you're knitting 2 stitches together. So you knit 2 stitches together, and then you pop that stitch back onto the needles, and then you're knitting 2 stitches together. And that's a pretty easy knit. It's a basic cast off, very beginner friendly, and I feel it's working for this garment and this yarn. If you think your tension is too tight, I previously did say that you could go up a needle size to cast off, and then it will be less tight, but I think that's worked really well. One sleeve down and the other one to go, so it's looking nice and neat. And yeah, every so often it's nice to sit and review your progress. And voila, the garment is done. I had great fun knitting this, and I think for a beginner knitter it's not too challenging. You've got some interesting things to get your head round and to up your skills with. So for instance, you've got the ribs, you've got obviously stockinette, which is the first thing you'd be knitting anyway. You've got garter stitch for the band, you've got buttonholes, and you've also got that roll neck. And not forgetting the pied de resistance, the increases. This version of the cardi has a slightly tighter neck. So that was just to show you what a tighter neck would look like. And this was knit with a 3mm needle, but I think a 3.5mm needle is probably a better size. So yeah, if you want to tighten something up, use a smaller needle, and if you want to make something a bit looser, use a bigger needle. Designing and knitting baby garments is a really fun thing to do. I've been doing it over the past few weeks actually, so it's not a very quick process. It's kind of slow because there's a lot of, you know, messing around, trying stuff out, trying yarns out, seeing what yarns work, what doesn't work, and also looking at design and seeing what kind of design works nicely. And garments take a while to knit. There's a kind of a period of extra knitting, like for instance the body, which I'm knitting now. There's quite a bit of knitting before, you know, I get to the next bit, so there's some downtime, which is quite nice, and you can watch a program as you do it, or have a conversation with someone on the phone, etc. So I mean, knitting is always a fun, relaxing thing to do anyway, even when you're not designing stuff, just going through the motion of the round and round knit, or the large bulky bit of knit that you just have to get through. I don't actually mind either. It's all good fun for me. I am thinking of upsizing this garment. So this is a 0 to 3 month old garment, but I'm thinking of making larger ones, so 6 to 12 perhaps, or 6 to 9, something like that, and then carry on from there. I also want to knit like a cardigan for myself, using this very same top-down idea. And I have knit cardigans in the past. I've even knit top-down cardigans, but I've never really bothered with the whole design process where I've written the pattern out. It's usually an abstract knit as I go type thing really, and because I'm knitting for myself, and even if I knit for someone else, usually it's in the same manner. Just make sure that it fits them. So obviously measurements and things are involved, but I don't bother too much about getting it correct. You know, it definitely has to be, this stitch count definitely has to be that. And they usually turn out really well actually, but I'm thinking it'd be nice to have some patterns in my size, and perhaps, you know, upsize from there or downsize from there. So some drafting techniques, and also learning new skills like drafting patterns in different sizes. I think that's quite a nice skill, which, although I do have that skill to some extent, I don't usually bother, like I said, you know, writing the patterns in different sizes. I usually make something for somebody and it's in their size, so I don't usually make exactly the same thing again, because I would find that quite boring. But I think, you know, when you go to knit a pattern, when you're looking for a pattern to knit, you do want to have something that's in a couple of different sizes. So I'm thinking in terms of my pattern writing, and to develop that, I do need to do a little bit more in different sizes. So this is the first size for the baby garments, and I could even do a premature actually, which would be nice, I think. But I am hoping to have a few more baby garments for people to knit and have the patterns. So watch this space for those that will be upcoming. So I am in the middle of a couple of other ones as well, and including a Valentine's knit, so that is on the cards, so look out for that one. But this knit has been a really nice knit. I really recommend the yarn. It's been lovely yarn to knit with, and I like the fact that it's kind of like stripy, but not really in your face stripy. The colors merge and mix, so I think it works really well as a baby garment, and it washes quite well. I know this because my sister and I bought this yarn together. So she bought some in a different color, but she has, being a very proactive person, has since knit up and washed the garment a few times, and it's actually, yeah, it's a good wash. So you can pop it in the machine, and it says on the ball band 40 degrees, and most machines are about 40 degrees, but I personally would probably put it in at 30 degrees just to be on the safe side, because you've done all that knitting. I usually wash my knits in a 30-degree wash, or I hand wash them, but because this is a baby garment, you can't really be hand washing anything for babies. So a 30-degree wash definitely, and if push comes to shove, I suppose 40 degrees. In the past, I've knit things in acrylic, but I kind of don't knit things in acrylic anymore. Apart from if I've got some acrylic in my stash, I will try and knit it up, because that's the best thing to do if you have got some acrylic in your stash. But going forward, and this has been for a while now, any yarns that I buy are usually either natural, well, yeah, natural really. So I will go for cottons, and cotton and silk, and also yarns that have wool in them, merino wool or other kinds of wool, even rustic wool I don't mind. But I think if you're going to make something for, you know, that you're going to wear close to your body, I think soft yarns that are not, you know, not itchy and won't cause allergies. So some wools will be itchy, and I do try and avoid those wools anyway. But those are okay for making things like slippers and this and that. And often, you know, the itchy wools, they felt as well. So if you wanted to make like a pair of felted slippers or something. I hope you enjoyed this knit along. I did enjoy knitting the garment and also making the knit along. Filming is quite a fun process to do. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the garment. Give me any feedback you want. I'm always happy to receive feedback. And also, if there's something that you think you would like to see on this channel, do let me know. I will be knitting a few other, I'm in the process actually of knitting a few other baby garments, so do watch this space if you're interested in baby garments, although I do other things as well. Anyway, I'm off now, so happy knitting, signing off for now.